Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing, the podcast for manufacturing leaders and professionals.
Designed for high impact on your way to work or unwind on your way home to gain clarity for tomorrow.
Step out of your comfort zone and discover new perspectives to add value, get results, and make a difference.
Yes, let's jump in.
Gee, Dave, I can just feel myself. I've been wound up today, and I've been a little irritated in some back-to-back meetings. And I thought to myself, like, what's going on? And I just realized that these last few days I've been working late, not really processing much. And I just feel wound. And what would I do with that, Dave?
Wow. Right. I mean, hey, I get that. It's a rat race out there at any given moment, any kind of organization, but especially manufacturing. And, you know, there's times when we just need to decompress, unwind, shoot, some words to other people that we know can just help us unpack. And you know, what's cool is today we've got a guy who does just that for a living, believe it or not. He's the ear and the sounding board for so many individuals. His name is Rick Ezell, and he's with Employee Care of America. And we want to welcome Rick to our show today. But it's just, we need somebody to talk to. We need somebody to listen to at any given time. What do you think, Rick?
Well, that's thank you, Dave and Trevor, for having me on. But yeah, you're right. We live in a world that's filled with a lot of noise, and yet people don't have that freedom to have someone that they can share their hurts and thoughts and issues with. And that's what I try to do in my work as a workplace chaplain and the ministry I lead. We just give people that opportunity and that outlet to share their hurts and pains and frustrations.
Yeah. Hey, well, you know, everybody's got a boss, right? Isn't that the boss's role to receive and guide and coach and counsel their respective employees? Come on.
Well, I think that's part of the boss's role, but some of the things that I hear from people, they wouldn't want their boss to know, and I'm not sure the boss would want to know some of the things that they're dealing with.
I gotta ask Rick, like, what's the difference? Like, I feel like I could just kind of vent out here for an hour, and then sometimes I'll do that venting and it doesn't really make me feel better. But what's the difference between someone really unpacking why they're wound up and just venting and not really getting anywhere? Like, what's the difference?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think all of us have those times in our lives when we just have to unload. And for some people, you know, I think it's their spiritual gift. They're constantly unloading and all their frustrations and pains and heartaches. But others,
that's a nice way of saying it.
Yeah, others, you know, it's real, it's genuine. Again, in our work, we tend to find people sharing their frustrations in three broad brush areas as it relates to work, as it relates to personal, emotional issues, and third areas as it relates to relational issues. And being on work sites, you can imagine that a lot of the times it's work-related issues. You know, manager or leadership has executed a policy or a new procedure, and it's come down the chain and it's affected these employees, and they're very frustrated because they don't have the information that the managers had that went into that decision, and they just need to unload on somebody because they don't like it. They don't understand what that certain issue or the policy is and the reason why and behind it all.
You know, that's interesting in that the people that pay your invoices, Rick, are the very ones then that people often are frustrated with, but yet the ones paying your invoices see the need and the value for a third party that is objective. All right. And by no means am I talking union. I'm talking somebody that is fully in on behalf and has the employee and the company's best interest. All right. And So what's your take on that? I mean, that sounds like something that would not normally happen, but that is interesting.
Well, I think what value we bring to an organization is, number one, managers, supervisors, leadership level don't have the time, probably don't have the expertise, and may not have the geographical location to deal with all their employees the way that we do it. And most companies, as you know, you're aware, they bring on a nurse practitioner, or they bring in yoga or some kind of exercise program. They have other people that have brought to the work site to deal with their employees, to work on their health and well-being. And so we provide another prong in that puzzle to allow employees an outlet to vent, to share, to express themselves.
Do you see a shift in the industry in the last year? Because I mean, I hear you, Rick, and the whole fact of we're always focused on cardiovascular health. We're focused on, your dental, your vision. And now we know from science that a lot of it's stemming from not unpacking how I felt the last 24 hours. And it's more to do with, hey, man, you're not feeling well because you're all wound up and you need to kind of, deal with some of that. So do you see the last year shifting more interest in that, more understanding?
I do. Interestingly enough, this past year, we did not lose a single client. Now, there were a couple of months where we didn't have the access that we would normally have, but that resumed, after, April, May, sometime we were back almost 100%. I think what it proved is that our service is so vitally needed because of all the issues that employees are dealing with. And typically, when we, before the pandemic, if we were scheduled to be on a site for, let's say, 2 or 3 hours, once the pandemic started, once we got back after that little lull period, we found that we were now there 3 and 4 hours, because there's this incredible need that people had to talk, to be reassured, to be comforted, to be reminded that there's so much of life outside of their control, but yet they needed to go to work. They needed to concentrate, on today and doing what they needed to do this day. And so I think we've proven ourselves. We're needed before the pandemic, but the pandemic proved the need for our service because we're one of the, I've used this story before, going into a new VP explaining our service. And I said, we just come on site, we make the rounds, we try to talk to everybody in your organization. And he says to me, you mean to tell me you talk to everybody in our company? I said, well, yeah, in a month's time, I'll see pretty much 100% of your employees. He saw the need, and he saw it beyond their personal, emotional, spiritual issues. He said, do they ever talk about work stuff? And I said, yes, all the time they're talking about work stuff. So we just arranged a little deal there that our service is highly confidential, so we don't jeopardize that. But we just worked out. He said, if you hear from 3 or more people the same issue, would you mind just telling me about it? And so it proved to be a win-win for him, because he was getting input from me, and I think all our guys serve that same role, that we can almost take the pulse of a company, because we're talking to virtually every employee in a month's period of time.
Yeah. Rick, an organization without, and correct me if I'm wrong, but an organization without the luxury of a service like what you provide, what would be some advice for frontline leaders, managers, the president of the company, the owner of the company? What advice would you give them that, again, without the luxury of a service like yours, what should they do because everybody doesn't have the opportunity to work with ECA, right? Employee Care
Right.
America.
That's true. Well, it goes back to that whole management principle. Management by walking around. I think there can be a demarcation between upper management and the lower employees, and so I think it would be well worth management's while to make sure they're out and among their employees. They're encouraging and affirming what they're doing, and they're making themselves available. They're there so that when employees have issues, that they have a comfort that they can just talk to them. So something like that, or listening sessions, town hall meetings periodically, so that employees can vent, share their frustrations, or hey, say what they like about what's going on. So those two things come to mind immediately.
I got to ask, Rick, the listening session, there's another term which I'm not going to use, and that's what they say a lot of these sessions turn into if you have them. And I think that's why maybe the unskilled facilitators, how do you keep it into a listening productive session and not one where it's a lot of just noise and negativity? How do you do that?
Well, I would do it by setting certain boundaries and guidelines at the very outset, that there's certain subjects we're not going to broach. Name calling or major negative comments, that sort of thing. So I'd establish those boundaries up front. And I found a great way, when you get listening sessions like that, it seems to be the extroverts that have no trouble talking in a big setting. The introverts tend to be quieter, but you need to hear from both. So I would say, if you got 100 employees, they're all there, I'd say spend part of that time in groups of 7 or 8, where there's a note taker and a recorder who's going to share the thoughts of the whole group, and that way they can filter some of the language and some of the emotion out and share it to the whole group. That could be beneficial for everyone.
Hey, Rick. I mean, this sounds maybe like a broken record, but what's your advice? What's your advice? Give us your advice. But what, you had referred earlier to work, personal, and relationships as 3 main categories of the content that, you end up hearing from people. Put a percentage on each of those: work, personal, and relationships, as to what what managers typically experience, or leaders in an organization. What percentage of work, personal, and relationships do you end up seeing come out?
Work is by far the greatest percentage. I would say it's probably 40%, and then the others are probably 30% each. And I was given an annual report to one of our clients, and we keep track of types of conversations. They're just a metric, so managers or CEOs can see the nature of our conversations. And work is one of those columns, and it was by far the greatest number of conversations was work, and they were a little upset. I thought we had a healthier culture than what it appears, and I tried to reassure them. I said, I think some of it is just the fact that we are on the work site, and work just seems to be a common first issue. I don't think all those conversations are necessarily negative, but they, it's and on our end, it's easier to record. Oh, we had a work conversation, but it tends to be the larger number is work, 30% each on emotional issues, stress, loneliness, depression, burnout, those kinds of issues, and then relational being issues related to marital or children, parenting, friends, co-workers, that kind of thing.
All right, so let me check my understanding on this. I'll turn it back over to Trevor. But if we're saying 40% work, 30% personal, 30% relationships, Cowboy math says that's a 60-40. 60% non-work related.
Mm-hmm.
And as a manager, as a leader, and this is not all about promoting you and Employee Care of America, but it just so happens to be, we've got 60%, we've got a manager or leader has got 60% of the things that their employees bring to them in the absence of somebody specifically to be on site and listen. That's pretty, I've never heard that to be a part of a manager or a leader's job description or in their interview about handling employee issues non-work related. And again, using the percentages that you described, if it's 60-40, man, that's more than half of a manager or leader's day-to-day responsibility in working with their respective workforces. That is interesting. That is very interesting.
Well, I would say that's anecdotal evidence. I wouldn't by any means say that that's proven statistically. It's just, anecdotally from our observations and our recording based on our reports that we make every month.
Well, we're not going to post it on the internet, Rick, as a statistic or anything, but I mean, hey, sometimes that's the best information. Is just, what are you feeling out there?
So best case, it's still 50-50, or worst case, you got 50-50.
Yeah.
My point is there's a large percentage of a leader or manager's work that is quote unquote non-work related, right? Based on my experience, based on your experience, Trevor, I don't know about you, but man, when I was in a frontline leader position for a couple of years, at least half of my time was spent in dealing with what's going on at home, financial issues, stress-related issues, marital issues, personal issues, right? So
I don't know. It was different for me, Dave. I didn't have any of that. So I just said, hey, you're at work, so leave your problems at home.
Nice. Well, and the beauty of that is you can't get in trouble, but you're certainly not gaining, friends and influencing enemies, right? I mean, you're not bringing on you're not encouraging your team.
No, and I wasn't unpacking any issues, and it kind of starts with yourself, right? So if I'm not doing that and I had my own stuff going on, so I'm like, hey, I'm not bringing it here. You shouldn't bring it either. And let's all just pretend that nothing bothers us and just have all these wasted inefficiencies through lack of communication and lack of collaboration because everybody's so wound up. And you just got to say, hey, tough it out, right?
How mindful is that? How mindful is that, right?
So I could share some stories of what doesn't work, Rick.
I think we all could. And it would be nice if we could leave home and family problems at home and just focus on work-related matters when we're at the job. But as you all know, that doesn't work. Doesn't happen.
No, I mean, it's amazing how, and then, as I started to realize that, hey, this is not serving others. And in fact, it's not serving myself either. And that's why they say when you focus on others, you can help yourself more just by caring about that bigger picture. But I can definitely feel that as that progress happened, it was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to share a little bit, maybe something personal here. And then all of a sudden it's like everything kind of like that whole weight kind of lifts a little bit. And it's kind of like, oh, okay. So Trevor's got some issues too. And, maybe we can approach him a little bit differently because now we have a little more information and could be can use some of those empathetic skills and just approach things differently. We could still get the job done. We can still be accountable, but it
Right.
just can be a little more mindful.
Well, I think, as a former pastor, those sermons that I preached when I revealed a struggle, a personal struggle or a personal flaw that I had and opened up a little more, seemed to be better received, at least as people were going out the door commenting on it, than those sermons that I preached where I was very guarded and didn't let people into my inner sanctum and my inner world. And so there is a sense that once we admit that we're all flawed and we all have our issues and we all make mistakes, and if co-workers can see that in us as leadership, I think there will be a better understanding and a connection there that's made.
So I asked you before, Rick, about, is it different in the last year? And so where do you see it going in the next year, 5 years? Like, we know that there's a pandemic, which causes a lot of crisis management from people not having the same social contact and making things even more stressful. So where does it go from here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't really know, but I don't. Theologically speaking, this life that we know it on this planet is never getting better. We're the second law of thermodynamics. It's moving from a place of control to a place of greater chaos, and I think the reality is, even though we will get through this pandemic, people's issues and problems and circumstances won't change, and they will still bring those with them to work. And my theory is that healthier people make better employees. So employers need to have someone like myself or counselors or a good EAP or something that's available to employees that will allow them that opportunity to express themselves, to unload. And a lot of times it is just that. Many times we're there just for support and not to solve everybody's problems. And I think a lot of people, back to the whole venting thing, they just want somebody that they can unload on. They're not really looking necessarily for an answer. If they want an answer, want advice, we'll definitely give that to them. And typically we want to be proactive. Most people just want that person like what we do as chaplains on site. I had earlier this week was talking with an HR guy. We're at their location down in Charleston and trying to get into their Spartanburg location. And so he has some experience with what we do because of what we done in Charleston. And he made an observation. He said, Rick, we have an EAP, we have a counselor on retainer, and we've brought you guys on. And he says, I feel like we're really well covered because we have all three of those wellness programs in place for our employees. But he said, I want to let you know that ever since we've brought you on, ECA and the chaplain there, that we haven't had to use that counselor on training this whole past year. Now, I didn't, he just brought that up. Again, anecdotal, not to say that there's a place for EAP and there's a place for counselors and therapists, but I think it proved the value of our service, that we can cut off a lot of problems before they get to the point where they need a counselor or an EAP. And that a lot of people, as we said, just need somebody to vent to, somebody just to share their struggles and their story with, and someone to listen and provide guidance and direction as called upon.
Rick, with what we've been talking about, I'll put you on the spot. You've worked with me long enough, this is coming, right? But at the end of the day, what comes to mind as the damage control that you've had to do based on managers, leaders going it alone and trying to listen and solve and guide an employee with their problems, where, man, if you just would have been available and on site, we could have headed all this off. What comes to mind there? And we're going to start wrapping this up, so that'll be the last one from
Sure.
me. But
Well, I think with the clients we currently serve, management really buys into what we do, and oftentimes, two things happen. One, let's take HR for example. They will learn of a problem and they will call us. We had that situation here. Client in Greenville, a major accident. One of the first people they called was our chaplain for that company, because they had to shut down the plant. It was gruesome and bloody. And so our chaplain responded. He went to the hospital to see the guy. He was there the next day when they brought the ship back in the next day. And so that showed the value, I think, of our service. So we're there when those things come up. The other part of that is HR will call us in and say, do you know about so-and-so? I want to tell you about so-and-so going through some struggles. And our chaplains will say, oh, I already know about that. We're already dealing with that situation and that circumstance and providing help and resources for that person.
hey, Trevor, before I turn it over to you, I just want to say it wouldn't be fitting without a scripture reference here with a pastor, Romans 12:2. Rick, it talks about renewing of the mind. And, forgive me if I'm taking this completely out of context, but that concept in and of itself, whether you're a believer or not, the renewal of your minds, we're talking mindfulness manufacturing today, Rick, and I can't emphasize enough how important it is, regardless of what position you're in, renew your mind, renew it daily, keep grounded, stay grounded. And with that, I'm done. Trevor, Rick, it's on you guys to bring us home.
Well, I was just thinking about Brian Scarrett was one of my mentors, and he was one of our guests about a year ago, Rick, and he started an employee assistance program, I think back in the 80s for Magna International, and working with Frank Stronach and that group. And it was just like, now it's like, you could not have that program in that company. It's just the culture now. And they realize that, and not everybody has access to that. And it is a skill development. But I was just thinking about my kids. As my son's 22, my daughter's 20, they're going to be going into jobs. And it does make me think that I want them to work at some place where they can discuss that and they have that safe place. And, and I think that other kids and parents and millennials are going to be looking for that. And we know that already. So, hey, there's lots of jobs out there if you want them. And if you want the best talent, what are you doing different for a wellness program, or what are you doing? I know definitely as a father, if I got one of my kids and they're trying to make a decision, and I know one company does things to take care of the mental health, and one pays a little bit better and just wants to grind you down. It's kind of like, come on, kids, let's just think about this for the infinite game. So on that note, Rick, thank you for everything that you do and improving our community and the wellness and all your leadership and all your roles in life.
Well, thank you very much, Trevor and Dave. I appreciate you guys and what you're doing, and thanks for having me on your podcast today.
Thanks for taking the time to join us today. How you show up matters.
We'd love for you to subscribe, share with a colleague, and tell us what you think.
Your feedback's important to provide this high-quality, powerful program that makes a difference in your life and others. Take care.
See you next time.